This is The Great State Mural, Mongolia Portrayed, our bi-weekly podcast that analyzes the current developments, deeper structures, and the joys of contemporary Mongolia. My name is Anthropologist, and I'm a journalist based in Ulaanbaatar.
And I'm Dolgang Aldar. I'm a development professional and researcher based in Phnom Penh.
And this is Julian Dirkus, coming to you from very hot Mannheim, Germany.
So today we'll be talking about Mongolia-Russia relations. So over the past few decades, Russia's relationship to Mongolia hasn't drawn much attention, even though Mongolia's history and development across the last century has been closely tied to Russia. For decades, Russia has always had a good image in Mongolia. Some Mongolians even refer to Russians as the Big Brother. More recently, China's relation to Mongolia has taken the spotlight with Mongolia's foreign ties, but the war in Ukraine has brought fresh scrutiny on Mongolia's position with Russia's relations. And one thing remains clear: Mongolia is still bound to Russia in a good way or not, and whether we like it or not also. So today, to talk about the Mongolian and Russian relations, we have Dr. Marissa J. Smith. She's a social and cultural anthropologist who will give some insights into Mongolia's relation to Russia and post-socialism and in the modern area in connecting with Mongolia. Dr. Marissa holds degrees in anthropology and Russian from Princeton University and Beloit College. Of the many research of topics she has focused on is where post-socialist and Western communities of practice intersect in rural spaces, which might be a good segue into our discussion for today. So before we start, here is your three universals. The Big Brother. The Big Brother helps us. The Big Brother tells us what to do. The Big Brother is still watching. Okay, with that, thank you for joining us, Marissa.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
So Marissa, maybe I had a burning question from you before we start diving into Russia-Mongolia relation, very light topic. So what led you to study in your PhD topic the case of Erdenet Mining Corporation, and generally, how did you end up being in Mongol studies and ended up working in the region?
Yeah, it's sort of not like the usual path, I think, for doing Mongolian studies or Russian studies. Yeah, how long of an answer would you like?
A good answer, however long that takes, Marissa. Good thing about podcasts.
Yeah, so like the short version that might fit like the most well into the topic today. I was very interested in Russian and Soviet industry and mining industry, in particular, petroleum, energy. So I basically started studying Russian in like the early 2000s. I studied abroad in Moscow in 2006. But around then is when it actually became a lot more difficult for American citizens to spend long periods of time in Russia, especially outside of like Moscow or St. Petersburg. And if you wanted to do the kind of anthropological fieldwork that I did in Mongolia. So I lived in Erdenet for like almost 2 years, and had, pretty open access to whatever part of the enterprise I wanted to see or whatever part of the enterprise people wanted to show me, which is totally unthinkable for similar Russian counterparts like Norilsk. Maybe you've heard of Norilsk. Norilsk was a closed city even for Russian citizens. So that's a medium-sized answer.
Nearby Rosk, my parents studied and met each other, and hence I am here. So it's a very...
Really?
Yeah, we both studied.
Oh my God.
Around there. Sverdlovsk, I think.
Sverdlovsk, yeah, of course, yes. Shabur.
Yeah. So you didn't pass crossed path with Zelensky when he was in Erdenet, right? Which year was it?
Well, yeah, he was. That was like actually before I was born.
Yes.
But I mean, I remember when before he was president, right? When his television show was on, Servant of the People. People from Erdenet were really excited, and told me like, "Oh, he's from Erdenet. We're really excited." Yeah, he was there in like the early '80s, and his father is still a metallurgical engineer, but he's back in Ukraine and is a professor there. But yeah, he was one of the people responsible for, like, basically Erdenet was the implementation of some of his designs that were, like the cutting edge of mining technology for the entire Soviet Union.
And yes, I was alive in the early 80s, but I did not cross paths with anyone in Erdenet or with Zelensky.
I didn't realize it was that long ago. Yeah.
He looks younger than he is, or I look older than I am, who knows. Okay. But so, big picture, Marissa, is the shape of the relationship. I mean, we Anand sort of referred to the historical legacy of this big brother relationship or so. What's it look like today? If we take out that historical affinity, whatever it might be, what is the Russia-Mongolia relationship today?
There's like a couple of things I've been tracking closely, and honestly, what's going on with Erdenet, or we were speaking a few hours ago in our text chat about Mongolrostvetmet. I didn't know about that until you guys brought it up, but once you brought it up, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that this is happening, that might be happening. So the mining infrastructure, the energy dependence, that is still extremely important, but that's been constant now for, decades at this point, right? In terms of things that are, that I'm following that involve Mongolia and Russia getting closer, there are some trends of integrating Mongolia more closely into post-Soviet networks like the Eurasian Economic Council. That's what it's called, right? I have the acronym stuck in my head for some reason.
Union rather than council.
Yeah, thank you. It's supposed to kind of... There was some stuff early on about it being like a European Union style thing. It seems to not really be that anymore. So, yeah. That. And... also, I've been tracking, I don't know if you guys want to talk about this on the podcast, but I have been tracking, resonances between Mongolian legislation and Russian legislation that I think maps on very nicely to the guest you guys had just in your last podcast.
Because the defamation regulation is similar across the sort of post-Soviet space, and as far as one can tell, is more or less copied, isn't it?
So there were, I haven't looked at the actual text of the law, but it seems to be a similar strain. But also you have the anti-fake laws, they're called in the Russian context, and the Mongolian version was the spread of false information. So Russia, they already had that, but they intensified it during COVID, and that's when you had it happen in Mongolia. And as was also noted, I think, on the podcast prior to this one, that was then used to prosecute people who were, making political memes. Although it was originally used for COVID, quote-unquote misinformation, criticizing the quarantine conditions and so on and so forth.
Connecting to what Marissa was saying about similar laws being applied in Mongolia, etc., there's been a lot of discussions whether the Mongolian parliamentarians and politicians generally have been copying or applying the Putin's playbook. And one of them includes, of course, defamation law and suppressing expression of freedom of expression, etc. But there are also many other examples we can point to with regards to this examples, good practices coming from Russia. So have you seen or observed any changes in the intensity or frequency of similar kind of rhetoric spreading in Mongolia than from Russia. A few years.
You mean kind of like from the government, from popular movements, from
both.
I did just realize a couple days ago, kind of wanted to see how, defamation, quote unquote, had been applied in Russia recently, and what I immediately came back upon was that so Navalny, when he came back from Germany to Russia and was immediately arrested, right? There was like a case that he had been on under probation conditions for, where he didn't check in or whatever, so he was on trial for that. But they also, at the same time, actually were trying him for criminal defamation of a veteran, and that was before this whole anti-fake law that was spreading false information about the military came into effect. Right. So again, I think this is a strong resonance, right? That the fact that the defamation is affecting Mongolian journalists, like the fact that defamation was one of the things that really put Navalny away for good, was also criminal defamation.
And for people like us working abroad, doing social research, etc., a lot of accusations of like foreign agents. People working in NGOs, they're labeled as getting money from the West, etc. So that's really, based on my observation, increasing.
Yeah, that was another one I'm like tracking. I haven't really heard the NGO law come up again recently, but it was.
No, it hasn't.
Is it still kind of technically under development, or?
It is. There hasn't been much development. The main person who was pushing this law was Nyambatar when he was the Minister of Justice and Internal Affairs, and then he became the city mayor, and now he does not have any positions at the moment.
Yeah.
So it hasn't come up. But for me, I don't. Is it? Maybe it's my naivete, but I feel like the people who are like developing these laws that are similar to Russia, they're not like actually looking into Russia's laws or anything. It's just like, to me, it's more like an organic thing that they are just bound to by the. Or is it wrong?
I have a spreadsheet, and you can line up the dates, and you can line up the names, and.
So there is some correlation there. Okay. That's interesting.
Do you have any sense at all, Marissa, of how that would be happening? Is that the Russian ambassador calling someone up and saying, "Hey, here's a draft. Why don't you implement?" I mean, is there any hint at what those networks look like?
There's tons of high-level meetings between Russian and Mongolian officials all the time, and one could, I'm sure, find some. There was a working group between, this person's aides and this person's aides where they were going to talk about this topic. If you looked at TOS, or you collected, mass media, I would look for things like that. But yeah, I don't think, it's really possible to really neatly trace in that way.
Can I jump back to the mining? Because, I'm keen.
Yeah. Of course.
Erdenet nationalization is almost 10 years ago by now, right? And it was, in a way, nationalization, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm
getting PTSD about this, man.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Privatization, whatever, buyout, whatever the thing was. In any case, the thing that it was is that the Russian owners are gone, co-owners. And there really aren't any prominent investments in the mining sector that are directly Russian, are there? And so is the commercial relationship in mining doesn't seem to be very active anymore.
Well, the way that I look at it is the infrastructure is still, much of it is still tied to Russia. The biggest example, of course, would be the railroad itself, which is still a joint enterprise. but also you have a lot of, it's really interesting thinking too about the Eurasian Economic Union, if we see that as not just connecting, these other nodes to Russia, but trying to connect them amongst each other. Erdenet still buys trucks, Belaz, from Belarus. When I was in Erdenet in 2024, there was Belarusian fish. They were importing, I think, uniforms still from Barnaul in Russia, in the Russian Federation. There's a lot of things like that. And then, when you get to needing to repair certain things, I think this is less the case with Erdenet, but if you start looking at some of those other mines that Mongolrostvetmet is associated with, right, like the fluorspar mines and these other, which are very important for the Mongolian economy. Like, Mongolia is one of the largest exporters of fluorspar in the world, and it's metallurgical grade fluorspar. I haven't been to any of those mines, but I can only imagine what kind of, infrastructure, equipment they need to get from Russia, or logistically they're doing that. And then of course too, just the social infrastructure of where people study, where people send their kids to go to school, where they have connections, that's all still hugely important.
How do you see Mongolia's relation compared to the other post socialist countries, maybe Kazakhstan, Georgia, and as you also mentioned, Belarus, are we similar to maybe Belarus or Kazakhstan? I feel like Kazakhstan now is in my eyes is that they're moving a little away from Russia, but there's still some connections there.
Oh yeah, totally. Kazakhstan and Russia still have a lot of interpenetration for sure.
I think one of the interesting things we wanted to hear from you is that obviously since COVID, we see a bit of a discussion on breaking away from Russia. So there's one group, for example, the No War movement, and especially since the Ukraine-Russia war, that really kind of resurfaced the idea of this Russia being a colonizer, imperialist, aggressive force that keep Mongolia underdeveloped. So that also discussion also surfaces when it comes to the hydropower or larger mega projects. One of
Even
the
key
railways. So one of the key arguments towards breaking away and getting more independent and developing more alternative neighbor relationships is around this economic development and fundamental infrastructure investments. Since the war, the Ukraine war, have you seen any kind of new developments happening in these areas between Russia and Mongolia? More perhaps economic investments, more deals, more trade, even exchange between people. Just as a normal citizen going to Ulaanbaatar, I see a lot of Russian nationals, often from Buryatia or that Siberia area in Mongolia, much more than before. So just intrigued to know generally how it's affecting the perhaps once a bit silent relationship to kind of become more dominant again.
It's a little bit hard for me to kind of keep in touch with Russian internet now in the last year or two, just because everything Meta is a enemy agent, right? It's actually I think Meta's an extremist organization. Don't quote me where exactly it falls on the hierarchy, but yeah, so it's kind of hard for me to see things online the way I used to be able to, but I know somebody who's from Buryatia, who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they went to Mongolia to do this, traditional health spa thing, either last summer or the summer before, and it sounds like that's a big thing a lot of Buryat people are doing. But also when I was there in the summer of 2024, and I saw I saw Russians every single day I was there. And both people who were clearly fleeing, like young guys who were fleeing being conscripted, both, of all different sort of ethnic appearances, but also, Buryat people at monasteries speaking Russian, and, stuff like that. But again, I think a lot of this has been fairly constant. There's been a very strong relationship and a lot of back and forth for years. So, it's a little hard to say things like that if they've really increased. And in terms of new mega projects or whatever, I think it is really informative to look at the railroad, right? Because for years and years, there were always promises from the Russian side that they were going to, electrify or modernize the rail, and they never did it. And especially during COVID, they began running a lot more freight. Like, do you guys remember when that passenger train derailed in the Gobi?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
there was also another derailment also in Sidling.
Okay.
There have been few incidences.
Yeah, but I mean, it correlates with a large increase in the volume of freight on the Trans-Mongolian, including between China and Russia. So, that's a very good example, I think, of how important this infrastructure is to the relationship. But the fact that it's not really being invested in, unless you count things like, there was a derailment. We have to get the Russian side to come down overnight and get the train back on the tracks, right? But that's not really improving the infrastructure.
Yes, speaking of investments, I think with the advent of the Ukraine war, there was a lot of European countries have stopped their gas, buying gas from Russia, and I think Russia sought another way to sell their gas to China, and one big project was the Power of Siberia too. But I think recently that project seems to have stalled, and not much have been talked about. Do you see this pipeline going forward? Do you think it will be a good investment for Mongolia or not?
I'm not holding my breath. Again, pipelines have been something that I remember were being talked about, in 2008, I think that Power of Siberia 2, it's doing a lot of symbolic work for, kind of a Russia, Mongolia, China trilateral thing, right? And I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be this idea of a Russia, Mongolia, China corridor of the Belt and Road and all of that. The Power of Siberia is maybe the only part of that left, unless you count the Trans-Mongolian Railroad, which, again, is not really being maintained, but is not really being improved.
And maybe the small border crossing traffic in the west, right? That seems to be very active. Everyone's saying going north from Mulangom and then going from Hoften into China. But yeah, the big project is gone. My sense in April was in Ulaanbaatar, to my great surprise, that the pipeline was back in a way. Right, and it got a mention in the 5-year plan of the Chinese government, which was unusual. The whole setup all along has been, I think, and correct me if you see this differently, but this is Russia looking for an outlet for gas exports because Europe is gone. China being relatively reluctant because at this point they have an ample supply out of all kinds of directions and don't really urgently need this Siberian gas. That shifted a little bit with the attack on Iran, although not really, because Chinese shipping was less impacted than many other nations. And all along, to me, because Anand, you just asked about Mongolian investment, I think there is no Mongolian investment, right? It would be entirely Chinese-Russian invested. And the proposition for Mongolia has been
it's not going to do anything for Mongolia.
Along. Nothing, right? There's going to be some minor transit fee, maybe a tiny little spigot for some kind of new power plant.
Yeah, I mean, whatever the people who are controlling the on-off switch feel like giving Mongolia, right?
Even last year, what's the company's name again? The Russian company that was planning to build the pipeline. They closed down their Mongolia offices. Yeah,
I think it ends in neft because all Russian mineral companies don't.
Rosneft. Yes, yeah. Rosneft closed down their like.
Which is technically oil. That's an oil company. It's not. Neft is oil, but anyway.
Yeah. They basically closed down their Power Siberia offices in Mongolia, not the oil part, but the potential production line, the potential the feasibility offices of the Power Siberia.
So I think again, this isn't something. I mean, maybe if you wanted to dig for it, but to kind of speak in the realm of resonances and this balances of different things happening. I think it's interesting that Eggingol, the dam, which I think Dolgyum just mentioned, that kind of has had its kind of going away and coming back, but I think it's on a no right now, and Russia has been pretty against it the whole time. So if you think about that being off, it's convenient for, Power of Siberia too to be this oh yes, this would be a wonderful Russia, Mongolia, China, together thing to do. It's a really effective symbol.
Oh, so you think this is for the Mongolian government to be supportive? This is basically saying, "Oh, look, but we're cooperating, even though it's relatively meaningless." Mm-hmm. But to have a positive project, is that sort of your interpretation?
I mean, yeah, it, and I don't really even know. I mean, it sounds like you had conversations with people, but whenever I see Power of Siberia 2 coming up in the news, often it's... I remember the last kind of big time it went up, it came up in the news, it was more people who are kind of trying to infer what the Russian-Chinese relationship is. And Mongolia was an afterthought in a lot of the, sort of international relations press. Yeah, but yeah, if there was a map, then Mongolia, it's like this cool line going through Mongolia, right? So it looks cool on a map, which is not nothing. But...
And I think especially given the recent Hormuz Strait blockage and all the issues, energy sovereignty and all that, people were a bit nervous in Mongolia that perhaps this Power of Siberia project will come up prominent. So it's something that's living with us all the time, and we just hope it will go away, but it keeps coming up every time.
I mean, these projects take years as well. And I'm not even sure that... I think some of the earlier proposals, at least, were to basically even be opening up, a new set of gas fields. And the gas fields that are the endpoint are, the Yamal Peninsula, which is, it's like Western Siberia, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very... It would be a project that would take years to actually complete.
And Julian, you mentioned just earlier that the current government of Mongolia perhaps is keen to show its support or alignment with Russia's initiatives. And I was just looking at the polling data by IRI and IRIM, and they actually asked people which of the political parties have the strongest pro-Russia leaning. Mm. And of course, 30% of the respondents said MPP, Mongolian People's Party, which is understandable. And also we see that not only MPP is seen as quite pro-Russian, in addition to that, when I think an earlier study from 2022 before the war asked Mongolians what should Mongolia's foreign policy be, how should we balance the two neighbors versus the Western, etc. And it's really interesting to see that of course, the age group above 55 are wildly over 60% strong pro-leaning towards both Russia and China. That relationship is most important for our security and everything. The younger people are obviously they're more interested in pro-Western, but there was no one said Mongolia should only pursue Western kind of cooperation. Mm-hmm. Everybody said of course, we should consider Russia and China, but just the degree is different, fully or medium or slightly. And overwhelmingly, majority are really seeing the importance, and of course that's understandable. But I don't know, what's your reaction to that, and what do you see any difference before the war, now, people's attitudes changing? At least what's happening on the social media, etc.
I mean, I definitely have gotten the sense from Mongolians who are my age and older that, similar to Ukrainians and Russians I know, and people from other parts of the Soviet Union that live in the Bay Area, there is a similar sense of why did this happen? It's a civil war basically, right? How could this happen that one brother is attacking another brother kind of a feeling. I definitely was picking up on that from some Mongolians as well. But I think that doesn't necessarily translate into other other kinds of other sorts of sentiments or acts of resistance or those sorts of things, right?
Just a heads up to our listeners, please consider subscribing to the podcast to stay up to date on new episodes. Please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. It makes the podcast easier to find for others. We would like to improve the production and the quality of the podcast, so please support us at buymecoffee.com/GreyStateMural to contribute to that aspiration. Apart from your podcast app, you can find more information about us, how to support, how to comment, and more information on other episodes at agulomedia.com/podcast. Now back to the show.
So again, in the polling is, because the way you described it right now, the question, I don't know if the question was asked this way, but the results sounded like that way, that respondents thought as Russia and China as one category in a way. Does the question in the polling lump them together, or was that just your interpretation now?
The polling lumped them together. Pro-China and Russia is one type of group.
As one category. Very
That's
interesting.
Weird.
That's
odd.
Yes. That's how it's presented in their presentation. But I can check the questionnaire actually how they asked.
Which organization was it?
Why do you react? Yeah. That's odd. That's all our reaction. But Marissa's yours. Why do you think that's odd?
I'm just wondering, who did you guys say the polling organization was?
It's International Republican Institute, IRI.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that doesn't necessarily... Okay, well, I'm just saying... There are of course some organizations and some schools of thought, and a lot of them are U.S. based right now, who think that I just heard one of these people I could cite today saying, quote unquote, that Russia is a vassal of China, which is I think is not accurate. But maybe it's coming from an idea like that. But I think it's not analytically sound to poll Mongolians and ask if you're saying this. And I remember this being a Sant Moral asking this question a lot too. They never grouped countries together like that.
I can check the questionnaire and get back to you. But I would, like you say, I wouldn't be surprised if they lumped them together from their side, because it's almost like seeing the ideology difference rather than countering foreign policy.
Yeah.
Are we willing to look at more authoritarian
and just
neighbors?
Just in the US, and I think this may have intensified just because things are feeling, frankly, very isolationist and more isolationist all the time. But the focus on China also has really stepped up. And so, this phenomenon of people looking at a map, seeing Mongolia is next to China and just thinking China is in control of the entire dynamic in the region, that's a major thing.
But from our perspective and focus on Mongolia, we would all argue that the relationship is quite different to Russia versus China. I think, right?
Yeah,
I'm seeing
definitely,
nods around.
definitely.
We're not doing video today, but I'm seeing nods around the screen. Right, that is both politically as well as sort of emotionally, even generationally different. That is not a relationship that's easily lumped.
Yeah. I mean, just from the American side, the idea that Russia is irrelevant and is not an important actor, even despite the war, but in some ways because of the war, right? The U.S.-Russia relationship is causes a lot of people to miss very important dynamics in Mongolia, I guess I would say.
What do you think that maybe like the Western side miss about Russia and China at the moment in relation to like maybe Mongolia?
I mean, I think also too, right? It's not always in Mongolians' interest to point out that they have these relationships with Mongolia, right? And it's often not in the interest of Russians to point out that they have these infrastructure, not just relationships, like hard-coded, right, connections with Mongolia. So it's not all, it's not really necessarily obvious that it's there either. But yeah, again, just I think that there's, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, right? Given how Americans at least think about race, it blows their minds that Mongolians would have this relationship with Russians, but have the relationship at the same time they have the relationship they do and the ideas they do about China and other East Asian countries.
Can you expand on that? Like I feel like a lot of people might not know the context of Mongolia, China, and Russia.
They just think all Asian people should be friends and all European people should be friends, and if you cross the racial boundary, people are just very resistant to that.
Yes.
I mean, so back to my dissertation, which I think also, I was thinking about this with the question about polling and what countries people in Mongolia feel are, they want to have a relationship with, or I can't remember how these survey questions are quite worded. What I found was like in Erdenet, it was not just Russia and Mongolia, right? So even from the very beginning, the copper mines that they were replacing in the Soviet system were in Kazakhstan and Armenia. And you had Kazakh and Armenian specialists like still in Erdenet, and in like the 2010s, like there were new Armenian people like moving to Erdenet, right? And then as soon as they could, in the 90s, I don't know if you guys have heard of Otkunbilig. He was the general director, and then he was a member of parliament. He was killed in that helicopter. Helicopter crash. He was very international, actually. The helicopter crash, if I remember right, it was a helicopter crash full of like UN people, like there were like Japanese citizens and stuff, because they were going to go inspect, Zood related disaster stuff. That was the conditions of the helicopter crash. But one of the things he did is he went to Michigan and, right away set up this Erdenet factory in Erdenet, which is not, huge, but that they actually refine copper into, sheets and cables, and there is a copper refinery in Mongolia, right? That people don't really know about, but it was actually set up in the 90s, and it was set up as a joint Mongolian American enterprise, partly by Otkunbilig, right? And a lot of the equipment actually is Finnish, because the Finns kind of retconned like Soviet equipment, and then we're selling it to different enterprises like Erdenet. And so it's actually Erdenet is a great example of just internationalism in Mongolia.
And until this day, every time we have issues about Oyutolko on the media and how unfair the agreement and everything, people refer to Erdenet always as a good practice. They say, look at Erdenet, why can't Oyutolko be like Erdenet? So people feel very dear to about developments that happened, except of course the huge amounts of corruption and tendering government issues there. But apart from that, I think people have very positive views about it.
Because the money is in some ways flowing into the government funds, unlike Erdenet at the moment.
Which we should expand on in our future episodes.
Why that's an ongoing topic all the time, right? Marissa, can we prod you into an outlook? Look into your crystal ball. Are we expecting the next 10 years of Mongolian-Russian relations roughly to be like the last 10 years? Or is there big change on the horizon? New generations? What do you think?
Not to be Americentric again or anything, but, I think one thing to look at, too, is just how the U.S.'s position with its Indo-Pacific strategy has also sort of left a vacuum, because that was important, I think, also to how Japan and South Korea engaged with Mongolia. Correct me if other people in the room who might know more, but that's something going on here too. But yeah, I see these things that I said I'm tracking with Russia. I see that increasing in the near future. I see essentially relations becoming closer and maybe more visible. But it will not be mega projects. It will be, European Economic Union, like we're going to buy jet fuel and it will be run through an arbitration court in Belarus and things like that, as well as maybe some of these legislative things that are really serious, human rights concerns.
So are you saying that because of like America's current views on like being more isolationist, that the Russia and maybe like China's influence will be stronger here? Is that correct?
Well, it's not just America's views. I mean, there have been huge cuts to State Department, USAID, all of as I'm right, and Mongolia was hugely affected. And I'm actually surprised. Yes. I thought IRI had even been completely shut down in Mongolia. So
they got different funding from.
Okay.
But they almost got shut down. But yes.
Yeah.
A lot of foreign international organizations have suffered, and a lot of projects here have also kind of halted. And thankfully, one project that was that almost got shut down didn't get shut down. The water refinery. Yeah. Which is good. I think that was a good. For me, that was like one of the things that showed maybe Mongolia had like probably had a good relationship with America and finding a way to save that project, unlike other projects that were similar in vein, like the similar compact projects all over the world. They were almost complete, but they got shut down. But Mongolia found a way to
interesting
survive. Yeah.
And I've been also following a bit the Russian embassy's Facebook page. And they have been posting like really interesting stuff. For example, the ambassador, he writes very openly about how Mongolian government should crack down protest movements in the streets.
Is he still doing that? Because
the new one still
What? Okay, weird.
Yeah.
And I thought that guy actually resigned eventually.
He resigned.
That was like Azizov?
Azizov, yes. And the new guy did the same, something even more offensive recently. And around
I guess it's okay. I guess it's okay to be on Meta if you're going to be writing propaganda that's directed towards Mongolians. Sounds like that might be the TLDR on that.
Yeah. And in 2023, soon after the war, the No War movement, a couple of young Mongolians who were really protesting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So during that time, it was interesting. For example, the Russia's Minister of Emergency, I don't know what the official English name, have given advice or recommendations to Mongolian government on how to fight terrorist activities, protests, and how to control it before it gets out of control. So the Russian brothers' advisory role is still there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Tandon Shatter, when he was chair of Speaker of Parliament, re-signed a very comprehensive memorandum of understanding with their Duma and the Mongolian parliament, right? And I remember being really upset and tweeting about it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, he went to school in Irkutsk. He was going to Moscow a lot. He's big into chess right now. But he was apparently also just at Stanford the other day. I don't know.
Yeah, and Ostrad, he did his PhD in Russia as well, right? PhD in history or something.
I remember there being a scandal when he was in. This was a couple of years ago. We have it documented on Mongolia Focus when this was, but people were pinging me being like, "It's not real. It's there was something fake about it." But yeah, it supposedly he had something with the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences.
But he had something with rather than an actual PhD.
I mean, we should check and see what it says on his like parliament.mn CV right now. I don't know what it says right there, but yeah, he had some thing he was doing with that organization, which before I wouldn't even think that they were granting PhDs, but
I'm checking it right now, and yeah, it is written in his educational
so he still has it on his official
2013. He has defended his PhD in history at the Center of Mongol, Tibet, and Buddhism Studies Institute.
Oh, okay.
At the Academy of Sciences there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just on that note, though, too, I would just say that there are people Utral's age, like my age and younger, who have had closer relationships with Russian counterparts in their academic and professional careers, for sure.
But sometimes the Russian side don't really give that. They don't reciprocate that love. I think recently when Uchul visited Russia, there was a TASS story about how he's an immigrant of the Buryat people from Russia, which is kind of like
that's weird. Interesting.
Yeah, it was almost like it was a dig at him that he fled.
I mean, I just literally meant like where people go to school, like what organizations they work with. I remember being at this meeting in the UK about 10 years ago, and there were some young Mongolians who were affiliated with that. Do you guys remember that other railroad? It was called like Mongolian Railroad or something, and they were trying to build like that small rail line to Tavantolgoy or something. So there were those guys who were very Americanized. They were very Americanized. This was at Cambridge. This was like a Cambridge college. So we were in like, a seminar room hanging out. Mm-hmm. And those guys are over here. And then there's another young Mongolian guy who's like about my age, who's hanging out with a Russian guy who's literally from Erdenet, from like the Russian railroad. And I'm like moving between both of these groups of people. And like the two Mongolian guys were working on completely different stuff. Like, didn't really know anything about what the other person was doing. Like, didn't want to know, didn't care, didn't think it was important, right?
Yeah, there is a clear division between these groups, for sure. But it's hard to separate, just thinking on an individual level. Like, of course, as I told you guys at the beginning of this podcast, my parents have met in Russia.
Same here. My sister was born.
Mine didn't.
Full disclosure.
my sister was born in Moscow. My parents met in Moscow also. Yeah.
My grandma was born in Moscow, so that's a long way back.
Wow.
So it's a love-hate relationship. Of course, when I hear Russian now in Cambodia, I'm like, oh, it's amazing. Like, I feel so close to them in a way. But at the same time, you feel so far from them, like ideologically, or of course, like everything they do now is we've drifted apart. And I think Anand and I are the first generation in our families to not be fluent in Russian. Is that fair to say?
I think we can understand Russian, but I was doing a reporting about the Russians fleeing into Mongolia. I couldn't even find the words. I've realized I was saying a word and then I used an English word, and then the Russian person looked at me funny, oh, what does that mean? They couldn't understand what I was saying.
Yeah, and I think that itself is a testament of what's going on. We're still very much involved with Russian culture and history in this relationship, but also we're the first generation not speaking fluently in Russian. And I'm sure our kids, they're not learning Russian. So their generation would be very different as well.
Very interesting. So I think that was a takeaway already, Dorjan, right? The relationship is an ongoing one, and it's changing in some ways. Generations have a lot to do with that, and personal networks. One of the things I was struck by with what you said, Marissa, and we've talked about Erdenet many times before, but this note of the staffing by Armenians and Kazakhs within sort of a Comic-Con setup almost was very interesting. That the Russia-Mongolia, erstwhile Soviet Mongolia, but Russia-Mongolia relationship is of course embedded in a wider context and network. And
of course Ukraine. It wasn't just Zelensky either.
Absolutely, right? And so I come away myself with this reminder of seeing, not always looking at all those connections as just being, Russian plots of dominance, but being genuine international ties, and appreciate that very much. Dorjan, I jumped to conclusion on your takeaway already. Do you have anything more to add to that?
No, that was my takeaway, I would say.
And how about you, Anand?
I think I had the same takeaways, that it's a love-hate relationship with Russia, and I don't know, hopefully maybe in the near future we are not drifting far in a way, I feel like we need to
Вечный сосед, Anand.
Yes, Вечный сосед, the forever neighbor, and the forever brother, I would say. And maybe in the near future, Russia will find a way to embrace maybe human rights and the rule of law in some way.
It's pretty bleak, unfortunately, the whole. So thanks a lot for this opportunity to talk about Russia and Mongolia in a frame that's not cracking down on Navalny supporters and things like that.
Thank you, Marissa. Great to have your knowledge on this and put some things in context. Lovely to talk to you, Dorjan and Anand. Everyone have a fantastic day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.